What does hell look like? It's July 23rd in the city of Redding, California, and it's oppressively hot. It's nothing unusual for the city, which is no stranger to triple-digit heat for days on end during summer. Hundreds of cars pass through Redding on a daily basis, whether it's along the expansive Interstate 5 or the many smaller highways that crisscross their way through the mountain passes and valleys. Just west of town, one of these cars is making its way along Highway 299 towards the sleepy hamlet of Whiskeytown. As it speeds along the highway, the trailer hitched behind it begins to teeter, one of its tires having unexpectedly blown out. As the car comes to a gradual halt, the trailer's metal rim scrapes against the hot asphalt, sending sparks flying into the nearby brush. That spring had been unusually dry, even for a place like Redding. The brush was overgrown and completely parched, bursting with combustible fuel. All it needed was a single source of ignition, and by complete happenstance, it had found it. At first, it's just a small wisp of white smoke twirling through the air, but the terrain around the highway is steep, and fire loves to burn uphill as it consumes the oxygen in front of it. By the time firefighters are on the scene, there's little hope of a quick containment, as flames lick the tinder dry fuels. Due to its location at the intersection of Highway 299 and Judge Francis Carr Powerhouse Road, the steadily growing blaze is named the Carr Fire. There's nothing entirely unusual about the Carr Fire as it burns through the area's thick brush, however. Fires in California have been a constant for millennia, a vital part of the natural ecosystem. However, we wouldn't be talking about it today if it had just remained another fire in Northern California. Several hidden factors lay beneath the surface that day that contributed to its ultimate growth. For one, the fuels weren't just dry, they were historically so. A wet winter followed by a rainless spring had left the vegetation overgrown yet desiccated. It had been a long while since the mountains around Whiskeytown Lake had burned, meaning there were few burn scars around to slow a fire if it did start. That week's heat, too, was not merely pedestrian, but some of the most intense the region had seen in several years. These conditions meant that the odds were stacked against firefighters from the very beginning. That afternoon, their efforts are spent trying to stop the fire's forward progression, using retardant drops, bulldozers, and hand crews. But every time the fire seems like it's fizzled out, it slops over the containment lines and makes another run using the rugged terrain as a valuable ally. By the morning of the 24th, it's clear that the fire would be more of a long-term incident than hoped, as the blaze slowly but consistently burns towards the east. By the 25th, the Carr Fire had expanded enough to threaten the small community of French Gulch, where evacuation orders are announced. At this point, it's around 4,500 acres, and big enough to send a thick plume of smoke skyward. It moves precariously close to homes, many of which are spaced out and surrounded by thick brush and vegetation. Mark Porter, a French Gulch resident, flees with his mother and his dog as the fire surrounds their property. They can feel the residual heat, and see the ominous glow nearing their backyard. When they return several hours later, once the fire passes, they are fortunate enough to still have a standing home. Others wouldn't be so lucky. Even at this early stage, the fire is creating billowing pyrocumulus clouds, a sign of both the fuel intensity as well as the ripeness of atmospheric conditions. The air is still, leaving the fire reliant on terrain to spread. The citizens of nearby communities, including Redding, keep a wary eye on the plumes of smoke rising over Whiskeytown. Redding, however, has the Sacramento River, a perfect natural fire break impossible for an ordinary fire to overcome. That being said, Californians know what a fire can do, and how quickly it can spread. Residents of Redding's westernmost areas, Shasta, Lake Redding, and Keswick, are told to keep their eyes above in case the situation deteriorates. There's something ominous in the air on the 26th of July. The mercury at Redding hits a soaring 113 degrees Fahrenheit, humidity dipping to a paltry 7%. The Carr Fire has continued its slow march to the west, burning towards Keswick. The plume of smoke, which has grown exponentially from a few wisps to a towering column of ash and burning fuels, looms overhead like a specter. It hangs over the city, gathering energy as its flames char the earth below. A growing monster with a ravenous appetite. From 4,500 acres, the fire had quadrupled to 20,000, as heat rose into the air and embers showered dry brush, igniting new fires. The plume was beginning to plunge Redding into darkness. By this time, firefighters have already started evacuations on the west side of the city. The temperature starts dropping, and the air goes from still and heavy to turbulent. A strong northwesterly wind blowing through the Sacramento Valley intensifies as a result of the temperature difference between Redding and the Pacific coast. This wind rolls off the nearby mountains, swirling into the city in irregular ebbs. The growing plume starts to shift and contort, blown in multiple directions by winds at different layers of the atmosphere. Residents of Keswick and Shasta see something terrifying emerge from the distance. A glowing wall of fire, violently rotating as it makes its way across the vegetation. It does so with terrifying speed, consuming hundreds of acres each minute. Embers are thrown a mile in every direction, flung by the growing vortex. On the ground, firefighters come to the chilling realization that what they're seeing isn't merely the collapse of a pyrocumulus cloud. What they're seeing is a nascent tornado, carrying with it towering flames that devour everything in their path. Don Ray Smith, a resident of Pollock Pines in the Sierra foothills, is supporting firefighters near Keswick Spring Creek Reservoir. 81 years old and still working, he's been a firefighter for just over a decade, taking volunteer positions to help local communities in times of crisis. The fire is also personal for him. His daughter lives in Redding. He isn't one to just give up on a job, especially not one where people's lives are at stake. As his bulldozer draws close to a water treatment plant, the wall of flames encroaches on his position, jumping the recently constructed dozer lines. Aerial operators zero in on his position, hoping to make a drop. But the fire is moving too fast, and the spinning twister threatens to take the helicopter itself down. Smith is later found within his fully burned dozer, the flames too fast and too intense to survive. The copters circling Redding spot something extraordinary as Redding's longest night continues on. The swirling pillar of smoke and ash has started to move closer to the ground. As it spins, fueled by its own destruction as well as the unstable air, everything around it instantaneously bursts into flames. Trees, homes, cars, all of it disappears into the void. While knocking on doors in the Land Park subdivision, veteran firefighter Jeremy Stoke looks over the horizon to see a bright glow peering from thick black clouds. The neighborhood is on the east side of the Sacramento River, a natural firebreak if there ever was one. But the Carr Fire is no run-of-the-mill fire, where fire breaks and containment lines have any sort of effect. Within the plume spins an EF3 tornado with winds of 143 miles per hour that has just touched down near the river's banks. With unbelievable speed, embers jump the river, instantly catching the brush on the eastern side alight. Now, both North and South Reading are at play, and there's nothing but the grace of Mother Nature herself that can stop the fire. Stoke knows this. He's fought fires for 18 years. He also knows he can't afford to leave a single soul behind in the subdivision. And so, with the singular vortex quickly bearing down, he knocks on the last few doors. By the time he's on his way out, the tornado is approaching fast, lighting trees on either side of the road alight in seconds. There's no chance his vehicle has the capacity to outrun the fire. He sends out a distress signal, but it's too late. Jeremy Stoke is discovered within his wrecked and burned car the next day, having been lifted by the tornado and thrown off the road like a toy. Meanwhile, a short distance away, residents capture on tape as a swirling cloud of smoke, ash, and fire barrels into the western side of Reading at peak intensity. A scene straight out of hell. The tornado barrels into the subdivisions on the east side of the Sacramento River, twisting metal around charred tree limbs, melting road signs, and morphing their skeletons. Home after home is set alight, exploding from residual heat. The force of the wind takes roofs out and helps to collapse structures. Ed Bledsoe, who is stuck in traffic trying to get into the area, is trying desperately to reach his wife and their 2 great-grandchildren. When he's finally able to get through to them, they tell him that the fire is surrounding their house. Before the call cuts out, his wife Melody tells him that they love him. The tornado is meandering its way through the subdivisions, taking out houses, casting embers far and wide, and even looping around multiple times. There are many close calls in this area. Firefighter Terry Cummings is severely burned as he's nearly sucked out of his truck into the raging inferno. Northern California native Sean Rayleigh attempts to drive a stranded family out of harm's way. He's ultimately successful. While people in the tornado's path teeter on the edge of life and death, a second finger of the fire pushes along the southwestern side of the Sacramento River. The Sunset and Salt Creek neighborhoods are devastated, with house after house reduced to ashes. The fire also travels along the south side of Whiskeytown Lake, roaring through the unincorporated community of Page Bar and towards the town of Centerville. Daniel Bush, a resident of Keswick, has been recovering from a series of surgeries. Bedbound, he is unable to evacuate on time as the tornado slammed into the mobile home park where he lives. He is later identified by his replaced hip joint, scattered among the charred remains of his house. Morning rises over a Reading shrouded in smoke. As the winds shift and the fire begins spreading both south and northward, the orange glow illuminates the city. The residents of Reading begin trying to wrap their heads around the scale of devastation and loss. From 20,000 acres on the 25th, the fire is now just shy of 100,000, and still expanding quickly. 6 people have lost their lives. Firefighters Jeremy Stoke and Don Ray Smith, and civilians Daniel Bush, Melody Bledsoe, and her great-grandchildren, James and Emily. Over 1,000 structures, mostly homes, have been destroyed. Communities like Keswick, Whiskeytown, and Shasta have been devastated, with homes burned and vegetation reduced to skeleton trees. To fire scientists and meteorologists, the Carr Fire is a shock. Meteorologists and fire weather researchers such as Nick Noslar, Neil Leroux, and John Abatzoglu would later theorize that the unique topography of the northern Sacramento River Valley helped create the formation of an atmospheric profile unstable enough to sustain a powerful pyroconvective twister. The morning of the 27th, headlines across the world talk about the apocalyptic disaster in a small Northern California city. Firefighters from across the world converge on Redding to help stop the fire's spread and assist evacuees. Redding is left to pick up the pieces, the community forever changed. The fire claims 2 more lives as it churns through the wilderness. Cal Fire mechanic Andrew Brake and PG&E lineman Jairus Ayeta are both killed in the line of duty. 8 lives gone in an instant, cruelly cut short by the unrelenting blaze. But out of the ashes emerges a phoenix, a resilience and strength that becomes a beacon in the darkness. Evacuees are taken in by their neighbors. Firefighters are flooded with donations from anyone able to give. The community rallies around the victims and their families, creating memorials and celebrating 8 remarkable lives. Don Ray Smith, who, like so many others, had died a hero, promised his family a fishing trip after his assignment. In his honor, they did take that trip. The ripples from their cast lines, the resonance of his lasting memory. When the smoke finally clears, the fire has burned 229,651 acres, making it one of the largest in California history. The vast majority of the spread happens in the first 5 days, in which over 150,000 acres of wildland is consumed. The Carr Fire, as devastated as it ended up being, is one in a trio of blazes that would make the 2018 wildfire season California's worst in recorded history. The other 2, an inferno that raced through the hills above Malibu, and America's most disastrous modern firestorm, are stories for another day. This has been Overcast. Thank you for watching.